Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona Idrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book and empowerment coach for Muslims. In today's podcast, I'll be answering a question that I received from a few people after my last podcast, which is, how do I deal with my narcissistic father and my toxic codependent mother? So people want to know, what are their Islamic obligations towards these parents who have abused them since they were very young? So I've already recorded a podcast about this. It's podcast number 11, and it's actually the most viewed podcast of them all. It's got 16,000 views currently, which goes to show that this is a serious problem in our communities. And so many people are dealing with parents who are highly narcissistic, malignant, and toxic codependent. So whether your father is the narcissist or your mother, you can apply this to your situation, okay? Because some people have toxic codependent fathers and narcissistic mothers, whereas other people, and this is the norm, have the narcissistic malignant father and the toxic codependent mother. And everyone, and I mean everyone, who has these types of parents are suffering on various levels. They're suffering from a religious standpoint because they don't know how to deal with them. They're suffering from a spiritual standpoint, from a physical standpoint because their health is suffering, from a psychological standpoint. There's so much going on when you're dealing with parents like this, and it makes it very difficult for so many people to fulfill their Islamic obligations because the parents have failed in raising their children properly and with love and harmony and providing the peace that is needed in the home. So I'll break it down for you later in the podcast, but I do want to address the major issue we have in our societies at the moment and in the Ummah in general, which is sheikhs and preachers, scholars, they're not really acknowledging the tragedy behind Muslims having parents like this. It's almost like they forget that parents can also have spiritual disorders and personality disorders, and they can be afflicted by so many issues and so many mental health problems that make them highly problematic and even demonic. And this is what they don't want to hear and they don't want to address. There are Muslim parents who are highly demonic in their behaviour and horrifically abusive. And this is something we're going to address today, inshallah, because it needs to be brought to the surface and we need to open a discussion on what can be done about this situation, because many people are being driven out of Islam as a result of having parents like this. And if they're not being driven out of Islam, they're suffering from very deep depression. They are developing personality disorders, so their own parents are making their children narcissistic and toxic codependent. And there are some children who are actually driven to think of suicide or to suicide. And this can be as a result of turning to addictions to deal with parental abuse. Okay, some people cannot take it and they turn to the solution of ending their life to get away from their parents, especially if they live in a community where there's no escape from their parents. And unfortunately, this is becoming more common among teenagers. So if you look at social statistics in the UK and in the Western world in general, you'll find that more and more teenagers are turning to suicide because of the abuse that's inflicted upon them by their parents. And parental abuse, especially among Muslims, can also lead to a bigger problem, which is the increase in the hypocrites and narcissists in our society. So this is a disaster, because if we have more religious-looking covert narcissists in our societies, what's going to happen is that cycles are going to get repeated in the new generation. And not just that, so many people will abuse others in the name of Islam and cause more people to leave the faith. Okay? This is the satanic mission behind it. It's passed down in generations through toxic parents. So this is something we have to stop. And we stop it by creating an awareness of it first. And then we address what are we going to do about it. So parents who use religion to abuse and manipulate people and to justify their abuse, they are the most dangerous Muslim parents among us. Okay, because they are creating an understanding of Islam that is corrupting our societies. It's causing men to be abusive and misogynistic, and it's causing women to stay in toxic marriages when they have a way out. And it's causing young children to grow up believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a tyrant because of how much their parents have told them that they will be punished and thrown in hell over the smallest of mistakes. Okay, so they grow up without any love for Allah, and they grow up not understanding the true meaning of Islam because their own parents had problematic upbringings. Okay, so I'm going to look at this from a compassionate perspective as well, because we have to bear in mind that toxic codependency and narcissism is always rooted somewhere. And this is what I spoke about in my last podcast. So your own parents would have gone through so much hardship, pain, heartbreak, anger, abuse, trauma with their own parents or the people who raised them, which made them like this. Okay, they didn't have an opportunity to become empathic. So we have to always bear in mind that this is a huge reason for why they turned out like this. They didn't have good opportunities in life. But we have to end the cycle. If we don't end the cycle, you're going to pass it on to your own children if you yourself are narcissistic or toxic codependent. This is a huge problem. It has to end so that your children have a fighting chance of becoming empathic people. Now, guidance is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, there are people who raise their kids in the best way possible, and sometimes they turn out narcissistic because of the social environment in their school, in their college and university. And then you get some families where the parents are narcissists and toxic codependents, and they have an empath child. And you think, how on earth did that happen? They literally get a Matilda in their family by complete chance, out of nowhere. Even they find it strange that they have a child who is like this, so sweet and so kind and so empathic and angelic, while the rest of them are satanic. Even Matilda's dad thought they got the wrong baby at the hospital, from how strange it is, because she's so unique and so different. But unfortunately, narcissistic parents and toxic parents in general do not reap the fruits from having children like this because of the abuse they put them through and their own arrogance and ingratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also their trauma that they refuse to get help for. Okay, so like I said, toxic codependent mothers, they love the toxic environment. They love the pain and the suffering that they're going through, and that's why they stay. And they will say as an excuse that they are staying for the sake of the children, when actually they're staying because they are heavily trauma bonded to their malignant narcissistic husband. And the husband is staying because he's enjoying the control he has over this woman and the children. Okay, he can only feel powerful in an environment like this. He's unable to feel the same power when living with a narcissistic woman like himself. That's out of the question. So he stays with the codependent woman who is toxic, and he's fulfilling his satanic mission of making her like him. And when she gets to the same level of toxicity as him, that's when he discards her and goes and finds new supply. And all of this happens in front of the children. So the point I actually wanted to make was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold the parents accountable for the effort they made in raising their children in accordance to Islamic principles, like kindness and love and mercy and patience, alongside the correct Islamic education and a moral education. Okay, so regardless of whether your children turn out good or bad, if you have made the right efforts in your tarbiyah, you can meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment knowing that you did your best. However, toxic Muslim parents who didn't raise their children in an Islamic way and they were abusive and oppressive, they will have to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the consequences of their actions, because there will be no escape from them on that day. And they won't be able to blame their qareen, other people, their addictions. They can't even blame their childhood trauma and what they went through. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Muddathir, Ayah 38, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ رَهِينَةٌ. Every soul will be held accountable for what it has done. So everyone is on their own, and you won't be able to get away with what you've done on that day. Okay? So many people who have highly toxic parents have struggled with the Islamic teachings that scholars and preachers often give to people about the rights of parents. Okay? So when you have highly toxic parents and you're told by preachers and scholars that no matter what happens, you must obey your parents, you must be kind to them, you must be there for them, put them on a pedestal, honor them, and treat them well, it can cause many faith issues in those people, because they have not received the rights that they were due from their own parents to be able to give them what they are owed in return. And they also struggle with the teachings that promote the Islamic law that prohibits the cutting of family ties. Okay, so they say no matter what, you cannot cut off your parents and any of your family members. Now again, this causes a crisis, because the longer those people remain in these families and in contact with these family members, the worse their issues are going to get. So they might develop even deeper faith issues. They might have more physical health problems. They might have more mental health problems and so on, because preachers and scholars are refusing to acknowledge that there are horrific parents out there who need to be held accountable. But instead, they use the blanket approach of all parents need to be treated with honor and, in the best way possible. And they turn a blind eye to all the toxic things that they do that have caused the destruction of the lives of their children. Now, I'm not saying that anybody should treat any parent with disrespect, even if they have been abusive. And that's because the Islamic laws concerning parents are very sensitive. Okay, it's not Islamic for you to turn vulgar and vile and abusive with your parents, because it's your responsibility to hold a higher level of morality in these situations. Okay, because if you turn abusive like them, you're not solving any issues here. You're fueling them. And by completely cutting people off, you're also putting yourself in a situation where you could bring upon yourself even more issues, because people I know who have done this have suffered from guilt. Okay, even if they are in the right to do this, they've suffered from guilt because they don't like the feeling that they have to cut off their family members completely. And because of the anger they feel, they've closed all doors for reconciliation. Okay, now there will be some cases, some very rare cases, where cutting ties may actually be necessary Islamically. We'll come on to those later. But in this podcast, I would like to give you safe Islamic solutions in dealing with toxic parents, because it is not a one-fit answer for all. Okay, we cannot use the blanket approach for this problem that many people are facing, because it is harmful for some people to remain in contact with their family members, especially if those family members are highly malignant. However, other people might have toxic family members and parents, but they aren't malignant. Okay, so there might be narcissistic man children, women children, and so on. This can be navigated more easily. So I'm going to give you loads of examples of cases where it is necessary to distance yourself, and cases where you can be patient with your parents even if they are toxic, because there are different levels of toxicity. Some are more bearable than others. Okay, so we can't put all toxic parents under the same umbrella. And hopefully, inshallah, you'll be inspired to find a better way of connecting with your parents and building a better relationship with them by using a more compassionate approach that comes from understanding why they are the way they are. And this will only work with parents who weren't horrific in their abuse. So you'll find that there is some space for you to work with the situation at hand, okay? Whereas malignant parents, especially if there are two of them, they don't really leave much room for compassion and understanding from how horrific and satanic they've been in your childhood and adulthood. So we will go through all of it, inshallah, in detail and make as much sense of it as possible. And just before I jump in, I'd like to kindly ask you to like the podcast if you find it helpful. Do share it with people whom you feel could benefit from it. And do subscribe to the channel or sign up to my newsletter on the website if you'd like to receive news and notifications about when I drop a new podcast. So let's jump into it. And I'd like to start off by speaking about the malignant Muslim mother. Many people have asked me, does Islam say anything about narcissistic mothers? And I've scoured Bukhari and Muslim and I haven't found anything. But I did find something in the Quran about mothers who did oppress their children, and I found it really interesting. So if you go to Surah Luqman, verse 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ إِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. And we have commanded people to honour their parents. Their mothers bore them through hardship upon hardship, and their weaning takes 2 years. So be grateful to me and your parents. To me is the final return. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places quite a heavy emphasis on the whole process of pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding and weaning and everything that comes with having a baby. So as we know, if a mother was to breastfeed her baby for 2 years, there will be a very strong bond between them. And from this bond comes a lot of love and nurturing. So mothers by nature are very nurturing because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed this in their fitrah. And they tend to have this unconditional love for their children because of all the difficulties they went through to have them. So pregnancy can be very difficult for many women, and of course labour pains and everything that comes with it. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that because mothers go through all of this pain and hardship to have you and breastfeed you and look after you and love you, you need to honour your mothers. And this is why there's a hadith that is narrated by Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu, who reported that a man asked the Prophet ﷺ, من أحق الناس بحسن صحابتي؟ قال أمك. قال ثم من؟ قال ثم أمك. قال ثم من؟ قال ثم أمك. قال ثم من؟ قال ثم أبوك. So the man asked him, who is the most deserving of my good company? The Prophet ﷺ said, your mother. Then the man asked, and then who? The Prophet said, your mother. The man asked again, then who? The Prophet said, your mother. The man asked once again, then who? The Prophet said, your father. So this privilege of the mother being mentioned 3 times is a result of everything she has to go through. So it gives her a very special status, because not only does she go through all of this, there's also a very special love and bond between mother and baby that even the father doesn't have with his children as a result of the pregnancy and birth and this baby growing inside her for 9 months. So it's considered to be very abnormal when a mother rejects her baby and is abusive to her baby. And how do we know this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah At-Takwir, verse 8 to 9, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And when the mothers are asked, for what crime were baby girls buried alive? So the general interpretation of this verse is that it will be the baby girls who will ask on the Day of Judgment, for what reason were they buried alive? Because as you know, this was an oppressive practice in pre-Islamic Arabia. But there are scholars, such as Ibn al-Malik, who said that it's not the baby girls who are questioned about the oppression of their mothers and their fathers on the Day of Judgment. It's the maw'uda who will be asked about this. So back then, when a woman went into labour, it would be just her and the midwife. There would be no men there. So the midwife would ask her, what do you want me to do with this baby? And some of them would say, bury her. Okay, some of them didn't, and some of them did. So the mothers wouldn't do it themselves, but they would ask the midwives to do it for them. So the scholars say that the maw'uda in this understanding means the one for whom the baby girl was buried. So the midwife was usually a slave, so she wasn't held accountable for this because she was taking orders from the master. So it would be the mother who chose to have her buried who will be held accountable on the Day of Judgment for this severe oppression. So this is the only example I found of mothers who went against their fitrah. And baby girls were buried for various reasons. One of the reasons was because she wasn't a boy. So the father, who is highly narcissistic, says, I don't want her. If she's not a boy, I don't want her. Another reason was illegitimacy. So sometimes girls were born out of wedlock. They would keep the boys because the boys were always considered assets in war, as soldiers, and in trade, and as shepherds, and so on and so forth. But the girls, they would be buried alive. And even if they weren't buried alive, they would be used as maids and servants and so on. So it wasn't a common practice in Arabia. It wasn't something that happened all the time because many girls were born and they grew up and, there were plenty of women in society. But it was for special cases where a man came from a privileged background and he wanted sons, or the parents feared that the girl would bring them shame because there were so many issues surrounding women at the time, and for that reason their mothers believed it was for the best that their daughters would be killed from a young age so that they wouldn't have to go through all the hardships that women went through in pre-Islamic Arabia. And of course, some women were forced into it, but I'm talking about the ones who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding accountable. Okay, He's holding these women accountable who gave the green light to the midwife to have the babies buried. So this indicates a hard heart. It indicates the absence of maternal love and unconditional love for the child. Okay, even if you think that you're doing the best for the child, you will be held accountable for barbaric behavior and oppression and murder and everything that you've done, even if you try to justify the cause for it. Okay, because it's haram, it's forbidden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given you the right to oppress and take away the lives of His creation. These are His precious creations. And remember also that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to protect you from future guilt. There were Sahaba and Sahabiyat who, even after being promised Jannah, they were haunted by the things they did to their children in pre-Islamic Arabia. Okay, go on YouTube and search for the story of the companion who killed his own daughter. I won't tell the story here because it's really sad. So after looking into this pagan tradition of how children were oppressed and killed for no reason, abused for no reason, I came to see that pagan traditions are still rooted deeply in modern-day Muslim communities, whether that's in the West, in the East, wherever in the world, because the practice of burying girls alive out of fear of the shame that this girl might bring them when she's older is still found today. We still have loads of honour killings in societies because a girl was seen with a boy and her father couldn't take it, her brothers couldn't take it, and they murdered her, or they disfigured her and violently harmed her. People will make mistakes, especially in the West, where lots of Muslim girls who are raised in toxic households, they're going to have boyfriends. They're going to seek attention and validation from boys in their school, boys at college, boys at university. But somehow male relatives believe that they have the right? They've got the license to punish them in this way. It's completely anti-Islamic, but it's a pagan tradition that's been passed down. They haven't gotten rid of all of the pagan traditions. And if you go to Muslim women's shelters and trauma centres, you'll find women who have run away to seek shelter there because of male family members like this, or you'll find lots of women there who have gone to tell their stories about what happened to their female relatives who were murdered by malignant Muslim narcissists in their families. And you want to know what's worse? Some of these murders came at the command of the mother. You heard that right. Sometimes it's the mother who tells her sons or her husband, punish her for what she did. Beat her black and blue, kill her if you have to. She's brought shame to the family. Sometimes it's the mother who orders the punishment to happen. I've heard it many times. So don't think it's just something that comes from the male relatives. Sometimes the male relatives are acting upon the orders of Queen Narcissist in the family, the one who runs the show. Okay, most families have one of them. And sometimes this darkness and coldness that's in their hearts comes from their understanding of culture. So you have some mothers who believe that this is the right thing to do because of the culture they were raised in. Like I said, they think it's Islamic culture, they think it's moral culture, when actually a lot of Muslim practices are pagan practices. So women act out of character and out of their fitrah because they are trying to conform to cultural norms. And sometimes, and this is the biggest disaster, they believe that they are practicing Islam properly by being like this. So their arrogance and oppression and vulgarity and barbaric behaviour is justified by Islam. I don't know how they do it, but they somehow manage to find their own understanding and interpretation of verses and hadiths to elbow their way through society and do what they want to do. I mean, another pagan practice was favouring boys over girls. Until now, that happens in Muslim societies. Women are oppressed because the men are put on a pedestal, and that's why we have so many man-children in society, because the mother pampers them so much. The mother babies them and emasculates them and has a very weird, strange relationship with her son, especially the oldest one. And you'll notice as well that it's the mothers who create malignant narcissists out of their own sons because of the misogyny she fuels in them by disregarding her daughters and idolizing her sons. And until today, there are many mothers who force their daughters to serve their brothers. They are maids to their brothers. So of course these men are going to grow up and look at women as maids and their wives as maids and so on and so forth. And that's why we have so many marital issues. And this is why it's considered to be very abnormal for women to treat the girls that they gave birth to like this. Okay, where's the unconditional love? Where's the bond? Where's that love? It's not there. And this goes back to the state that these women were in when their husbands married them. And you can apply this vice versa too. Okay? So one of the rights of the children in Islam is that you choose the best mother for them and the best father for them. So you need to marry al-wadud al-walud. Like the Prophet ﷺ said, the one who loves children and is loving, so that they can have a healthy and happy upbringing. But what happens when narcissistic fathers marry toxic codependent mothers? They already set the stage for a toxic home. And it makes it very difficult for any healthy bonding to happen in this environment. And the only bonding that will take place will be trauma bonding. Okay? So when a narcissist marries a woman who is a toxic codependent, she will already have severe depression and mental health issues. She's come into the home with this problem already. She might also have jinn issues, ashaq jinn. So many toxic codependent women and men suffer from ashaq jinn problems. And this causes a lot of disruption in the marriage. A woman might also be forced to marry this narcissistic man if it's an arranged marriage. So he might be much older than her, she might not like him, she might not like the way he is because he's tough and he's cold and he's hard. But the parents have said, sorry, we have to get rid of you. You are a shame for us. You've caused us way too many problems. We need to get you married. That's the best we can do for you. And they force or pressurize her into marrying a man who is malignant, but he's got money, he's got something to show for himself that makes her feel, okay, maybe I can work with this. But she will be toxic with him because she doesn't like him in that way. Another possibility is that a toxic codependent woman has run away from home or has married anyone just to get away from her family. And 9 times out of 10, she runs straight into the arms of a malignant narcissist. Because remember I said before in the podcast about the woman child, these women always attract narcissistic predators who know that these women are vulnerable and have no support system and they're running away from their family. So they are great targets for them. Now in some parts of the world, like rural areas in Turkey, some parts of South Asia and the Middle East, there is a rule in societies that if a woman is raped by a man, she has to marry that man. So some women are forced into marriage with their rapist and they hate that man. But it's because of the shame that they don't want brought upon their family that she has to do this. You know, there's actually a famous Turkish series called Fatma Gül, and it's about this. It's about a young woman who got raped and she had to marry her rapist, and it was based on a true story. It's a very powerful series. You'll learn how to speak Turkish by the end of it from how long it is. I think it took me 3 months to finish the whole thing, but it was really interesting. Every time my mum came into the room to see what I was watching, she'd be like, "Oh, you're still watching Fatma Gül?" Yep. I'm on episode 125. She used to laugh at me. And she actually made me a cake when I watched the final episode because she was so glad it was over. So yeah, I just remembered that. It's a nice one to watch if you've got the time. Those were the good days. So yeah, these are reasons why toxic codependent women enter a marriage and they are nowhere near ready to have children. And something I didn't mention is black magic. There are lots of women who get married to narcissistic men and they have black magic done on them to ruin their life, to disrupt their marriage, to make them go crazy, and sometimes it's to stop them loving their family members. So we can't blame black magic for everything, but there are cases where women have had black magic done to them, and it's the reason for their toxicity. Okay? That's why I say whenever I do family counselling and the mother in particular is very erratic, I always ask if the mother has done ruqya on herself or if anyone has done ruqya on her. And most of the time they say no. Sometimes that will eliminate the problem if she's had black magic done to her for a long time. And that can sometimes be the reason for her cruelty towards her own children. So ruqya in some cases can remove the toxicity from within her, however she will still be trauma bonded to the narcissist. And some inner work still has to be done to elevate her nafs, because she's lived for a very long time in a toxic environment and with a toxic self. And when someone is possessed by jinn, it can cause you to get used to being in a particular toxic state of mind. So even after ruqya, it's easy for people like this to slip into their old ways if they have been afflicted by the black magic for a long time. But it doesn't mean they can't get out of it. It just means that they have to do some extra work with adhkar and Quran and their prayers to fight it efficiently. And as I mentioned in my previous podcast, someone's turbulent and toxic childhood can cause a woman to enter her own marriage as a toxic being. Okay? So if she's not healed from her trauma, if she's not processed and understood what it is that she's been through, she will enter a new relationship and unfortunately bring children into the world who she will use and abuse. That's a given. It's going to happen. Unhealed people hurt people. So if you have been raised in a home with a toxic codependent mother, these will be the reasons why she's toxic. And always remember that a lot of women, when they have children from men they hate, they might also hate the children. And this is the same for men. Sometimes a man will have children from a woman he hates, and he'll hate those children too, especially if they look like her. I've had women tell me this before. They say, I can't bond with my child because my husband is my abuser and I hate him. He has ruined my life and my kids from him look like him. And I can't love them. I can't take care of them. I don't even want to look at them. So she neglects and abandons them. And she's careless and reckless with how she treats them because of how she feels towards their father. So if she was forced to marry him, or if she was forced to marry her rapist, then it's highly likely if those children look like those men, imagine how she's going to feel towards them. And this is why forced marriage is haram in Islam. This is why you cannot force anyone to marry an abuser or their rapist or anyone who is oppressive, because the ones who pay the primary price of it are the children. But you still get shuyukh saying, no, you've got to listen to your parents, you've got to obey your parents in who they want you to marry, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. People comply and then get themselves into a lot of trouble. You know, there's a big question mark about obedience to parents in adulthood, because adults are now responsible for their own lives. So you can't be at the mercy of oppressive parents who keep ordering you to do things that may not be good for your future. So for example, they might say things like, if you don't become a doctor, I'm going to die unhappy with you. If you don't marry this man or this woman, I'll never forgive you. If you don't buy that house next door to us, I'll never forgive you, dunya or akhirah. If you do not divorce your wife because I don't like her, I'll never speak to you again. When parents do this, this is emotional and spiritual and religious manipulation. Okay, there is no obedience owed to Muslim parents in adulthood. Obedience is when you are under their care. Okay, you have to obey those whom you are under the care of. That makes sense. But when you are your own individual adult, it's up to you. If you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, as long as your income is not haram, it's all good. If you want to marry someone and they're pious and they're good people, it's all good. You don't need the approval of your parents for that. But in Islam, it's encouraged to show them respect. So you ask them for their opinion, you ask for their wisdom and their blessings for you to do certain things. Now, normal parents who want to see you happy will always give you their blessings. You're not doing things that are haram. You're not doing things that go against your principles and morals. Why shouldn't they be happy for you and give you their blessings? However, if they're narcissistic and toxic, no matter what you want to do that makes you happy, it's never going to be good enough if it's not in line with what they want you to do. So they use the obedience card here, which is not valid. Okay, it's not valid. Obedience is for those who are under their care. The same way, a wife is under the responsibility and care of her new wali, of her husband. So obedience is needed so that everything works hand in hand in the marriage. She can't be doing one thing and he's doing another, and they both clash together because she's not respecting his level of authority in the home, so that things can move smoothly. So obedience is given to those who have authority over you. Now, your parents have authority over you until you leave their care, until a woman gets married, and until a man is old enough to leave the home and start his own. So he's dependent on himself financially and is ready to get married and start his own family. But while children are living with their parents under their roof, they have to be obedient to their authority, because young children are still learning and their parents are responsible for them in many ways, right? They're responsible for their education, for their well-being, for their health, for their survival, and also for their safety. Okay, they're still young, they need to be protected. So it makes sense as to why Islam teaches us that parents are owed obedience by their children, because they're responsible for them. But parents are not responsible for a 40-year-old man. They're not responsible for their daughter who is now married and started her own family. So there's no obedience anymore. It's more about respect and good relationships and kindness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Isra, verse 23, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, and honor your parents if one or both of them reach old age. Never say to them even uff, nor yell at them. Rather, address them respectfully. So this is a general ruling for all parents. But like I said before, there are many people who find this very difficult because their parents are very abusive and they love to push the buttons of their children. They love to push boundaries, irritate them, trigger them, annoy them. And they do this with abuse, right? The same old abuse, the same tape just keeps playing again and again and again. The cycle never ends. So it becomes very difficult for some people to not say uff or show anger and resentment and bitterness towards their parents because of everything that they've been put through. So there's guilt. They read this verse and they feel guilty because they are unable to show love and mercy and patience with these parents whom they've had to go through 30 years of this cycle with, and they've had enough. Now, some of you might be asking, maybe you're not in this situation, alhamdulillah, where you have toxic parents. So you might be asking, what is it that people go through with toxic Muslim parents? I've recorded quite a number of podcasts about this subject before, like podcast number 39, which is about a problematic Islamic upbringing, and another one is number 68, which is about the childhood traumas caused by malignant narcissist and psychopath parents. So, as I said earlier, I'm going to go through some examples of bad experiences that people go through with their narcissistic fathers and toxic codependent mothers, or vice versa. If the father is toxic codependent and the mother is narcissistic, for you to gain a better understanding of what a lot of people are going through and why they really struggle to have good relationships with their parents and why they struggle to fulfill their Islamic obligations towards them. Okay, so I will be offering my advice and solutions for all of this towards the end of the podcast, so do bear with me and listen to the end so you can reap the benefits from this free counselling that will inshallah help you to resolve your issues with your parents, or at least to help you come to an understanding that gives you peace, closure and clarity from both a psychological and Islamic perspective. So, in my opinion, there are 4 categories of parents, and you can apply this to all parents, so they don't just have to be Muslim parents. In the first category are the parents who are abusive to their children during childhood and also during adulthood. In the second category, you get parents who are abusive with their children only in their childhood, but they were fine with them in their adulthood. So perhaps they got therapy by that time, or they repented, or they wanted to fix their relationship with their children so that they don't grow up with resentment towards them. In the third category are the parents who are not abusive to their children in their childhood, but they became malignant and toxic with them in their adulthood, and this usually results from failed expectations. Okay, so they gave their children a good upbringing, but the outcome wasn't what they wanted, because some of their children, if not all, decided to pursue their own unique paths in life that they didn't approve of, even if those children chose an Islamic way of life. Okay, so if they didn't become a doctor like they wanted, or they didn't want to marry the person whom they'd chosen for their son or daughter, then it can cause a rift in the family, and parents can turn toxic as a result of not being obeyed like they expect to be. And in the last 4th category, you have the parents who don't abuse their children in childhood and they don't abuse them in adulthood. These are the best of parents because they are empath parents. So let's go back to category number 1. That includes the worst of parents, right? The ones who abuse their children in both childhood and adulthood. And I must say here that sometimes your enemies are your parents, okay? Because of the satanic mission they have in your life. So these parents will be a mixture of psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, and toxic codependents. And they all work together for one mission, which is to destroy their own children, especially the empath children among them. Now you might be thinking, why would parents want to destroy the lives of their children, especially when they are toddlers? Right, they're so cute and sweet and small. Why? Well, after all my podcasts, I should hope by now you know why. It's because these parents have been overtaken and controlled by their evil qareen. And if they're particularly malignant and psychopathic, then they will be controlled and influenced also by other evil jinns. And these jinns would have come to them in various ways from their own childhood. For example, black magic, ashiq jinn, and so on. And these entities attach themselves to these people because they can. right? These are people who don't want to work on themselves. Their arrogance is so high that they never want to see themselves as being wrong. They will never humble themselves to actually look at their behaviour and listen to the people around them who are suffering at their hands. They dismiss everything and everyone. So these are people who don't want to help themselves. Okay, I've mentioned this in my previous podcast. Because it's more important for them to have power than to work on their nafs. So when you have parents who are controlled by the soldiers of Iblis, what will happen is the satanic mission will come out in their behaviour towards their children. Why does this happen? It's to ruin the next generation. Because imagine what a threat it will be to Iblis if Muslim families raised wonderful, strong, healthy, God-fearing, God-loving children. Imagine how strong future generations would be. Iblis doesn't want that. So he sends his soldiers to the weakest of people who become parents. And who are the weakest of people? Narcissists, psychopaths, toxic codependents, and so on. Because they're not fit mentally and spiritually to be parents, and Iblis knows this. So when he gets them to marry each other, and that's why narcissists are drawn to toxic codependents and vice versa, that's step one. Let's get them together. Let's get all the toxic people together, let them have children, and then corrupt them with abuse. Why do you think narcissists have children so easily and empaths don't? It's because there's a satanic mission behind it. Empaths, when they have children, they give birth to quality rather than quantity. And Iblis knows this. So he sends covert narcissists out to empaths to corrupt the quality of the children who are born. And how are they corrupted? By the abuse that they get from the narcissistic parent. So Iblis is working overtime to make sure there are enough shayateen al-ins and shayateen al-jinn to go round for everyone. He wants them to marry the empaths if they're lucky, and the empathic codependents and other narcissists and toxic codependents, because he wants his spirit to be present in all Muslim homes. So this is why when you make the decision to marry someone toxic, they've got red flags, you see the red flags, you know there's something not right about them. You already make a decision for your future children. And this is why in Islam, one of the rights of an unborn child is the correct selection of mother or father for them. Now, I'm not talking about people who really were oblivious to who they married in the beginning. I'm talking about the people who knew that these people were toxic. Okay, you could see, you could tell, people told you, you heard about their reputation. Yeah, you've got to be so careful who you marry, because this person will affect the future generation. Okay, they will contribute negatively to the future generation. So if you're married to someone and you're being abused by that person and you don't have children yet, you need to run for the hills. Okay? You need to run for the hills, like I did. There was no way I was going to have any children with someone demonic. No way. It's not a risk you should be taking at all. Because when you're married to someone malignant, and I'm speaking about the malignant ones here, not the man children or the women children who do have empathy for their children. I'm not speaking about them. I'm speaking about the worst people you could marry or the worst people you could have as parents. They are the malignant, psychopathic people. And what will happen is they will treat their children like they hate them. Their children haven't done anything to them, but they deal with them out of hate. And it's continuous from childhood all the way to adulthood. You don't remember anything nice about them. I mean, you might get the rare, good memory here and there, but 90% of what you remember is bad. And the empathic child is the one who is targeted the most. The empath child is the one who is used and abused and ridiculed and made fun of and belittled and degraded the most. Why? Because the light of that child irritates the demons within them. These soldiers of Iblis, they recognize that there's something special about the light in this child, and they know that if they do not work hard to destroy the spirit of this child and take away the light of this child, then he or she will grow up to be a powerful person who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can't have that. So the empath child is targeted the most. And you will notice as well that narcissistic siblings will also target the empath sibling when they grow up, especially when their qareen wakes up, for his mission during puberty. You'll notice that they target the empath, and sometimes the parents encourage it. So sometimes it will be the mother or the father who will egg on their children to bully their empathic sibling, especially if this empathic sibling stands up for themselves and stands up for justice and questions things that don't make sense. Right? These demonic parents, they hate that because they have to be the most powerful. So how dare you question them? So they get punished and targeted for it. And you'll notice as well with these particular parents, they will do everything in their power to use Islam in a negative way until you hate it. So whenever they, inflict a harsh punishment on you, they'll use Islam to justify it. And if there's any oppression or unfairness or favoritism that happens in the family and all of that, they will use Islam to justify it because they have their own distorted understanding of hadith and Quran verses. And again, this comes from their satanic mission because Iblis wants people to hate Islam, be put off Islam, and when they grow up, make that decision to not be Muslims or to not be practicing Muslims or have anything to do with their parents' religion. And how many times have we seen that? We've seen that a lot. So you can see how Iblis works through parents, and he makes the parents the hardest trial. And a lot of people have depression because of their parents and not being able to love them because of the terrible treatment they're getting from them. This is all satanic work. It's done on purpose. And I do wonder sometimes if shuyukh don't actually understand this, which is why they don't speak about it. Because if they were to understand this, then they would warn people about the fitna of toxic parents, the same way they warn people about other types of toxic individuals. Why is it that people are not warned about the toxic parent? It's because they're all put under the same umbrella of receiving the same rights from all their children, whether they're good or bad, and this makes no sense. So it's incorrect, because Islam is a very straightforward and logical religion. And I'll revisit this again later on in the podcast, but first, I want to give you some examples of abuse and major injustice that can cause people to sever ties with their parents or maintain a very long distance between them so that the abuse stops. And people who have done this, especially if they're empaths and they're quite practicing, will recognize that they have to do this and maintain this distance or sever ties to protect themselves and their iman, because they have understood that the soldiers of Iblis are working through their parents to destroy the family. So sometimes people have to do this for their own protection and for the protection of their sanity. So here are a few reasons why the severing of ties may be needed. Okay? And these are all reasons that I've heard from many clients. So the first one is their strong efforts to push you out of Islam. And they will do this in various ways. So they might be direct about it. They might not want you to be a practicing Muslim. They might make fun of your hijab and tell you to take it off. They might mock you when you pray. Who do you think you are? You think you're better than us. They might take the Quran from you when you're reading. You might have to hide the Quran from a malignant narcissist, even if he appears to be a practicing Muslim, because the demon within him doesn't want to see you improve in your life spiritually and religiously. So even if your so-called practicing parents see you practicing and enjoying your rituals and enjoying a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they won't like it. They will always ask you to do things while you're getting ready to pray, while you're getting ready to read Quran. They give you 101 things to do. And they will justify this by saying, I'm your father, you have to obey me. This comes before you doing voluntary acts of, worship. Your father is more important, your mother is more important, you have to obey us, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. So they push you into serving them unnecessarily sometimes because they just want to keep you away from your worship. And they might taunt you and make fun of you for your tajweed. They may punish you for the lectures you listen to and the sheikhs you listen to. They won't like Mufti Mink and Umar Sulaiman. I've mentioned this before. Your father might ban you from listening to these people because they're empathic. Just listening to them makes them feel like they're listening to nails on a chalkboard. The demons within them don't like it. So when they listen to their own, narcissistic sheikhs, they enjoy it because they're hearing what they want to hear and they can manipulate Islam using the excuse that, this sheikh, this knowledgeable person said this and he said this fatwa was correct, and it's not correct. They're just listening to the wrong people. So when you listen to empaths, they don't like it and they will create a problem out of it, and they might force you to either listen to their sheikhs or not listen to any at all. And they will enforce their understanding of religion on you from a very young age, and their understanding is cruel and harsh and tyrannical and, of course, highly misogynistic. So when they force this down your throat, eventually you're going to hate religion. This is one of the things that they do. This works on a lot of children because children don't know the difference between true knowledge and manipulation. However, if the parent continues to do this into teenage years and young adulthood, a lot of people will hate religion as a result of their parents and they will leave. So your parents can be the cause of you leaving Islam, which is why the severing of ties or distancing yourself for long periods of time or far away is necessary to protect your iman, because now you're living with your enemy. And the enemy in Islam is the one who pushes you out of the deen, because that is the mission of the shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that your enemy is the shaitan because he doesn't want you to be believers. He doesn't want you to love Allah. He doesn't want you to get close to Allah. So anyone who works hard to push you out of Islam and make you hate it is your enemy. Okay? You have to sever ties. You've got to stay well away from these people, especially when your own faith is weak. So sometimes you'll find empath children, they won't sever ties with their parents in this situation because they know very well what their parents are doing, so they're not letting it affect them. But if it's affecting you, then you have to, because the priority here is your iman. And you are considered to no longer be living with a believer because your enemy will never be a believer. They might say they're Muslim, but they won't be a believer. And as I've explained before, they're two different things. So if you're not getting your own knowledge from your own research, you're going to be influenced and affected negatively by their propaganda. And you will resent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ for telling you to obey your parents because you don't understand the context of it. You will wonder and question why Allah has forced you to obey and honor a tyrant. It becomes very difficult for people to understand certain rulings in Islam when you're dealing with very demonic people. And if you do not comply with their unreasonable demands, they will call you a fake Muslim. And they will tell you you're going to hell, and that you're going to get punished, and that you're a hypocrite, and that all your prayers are going to waste, and that your Hajj went to waste, and your Umrah went to waste, because they're going to die never being pleased with you. They're going to die never forgiving you, and so on and so forth. So it can really affect people and give them depression because they believe it. But at the same time, they're actually starting to hate their parents and they don't know how to navigate this relationship. Another reason is when they force or pressurize you to obey their demands of doing something haram. So in Islam, there is no obedience to anyone who has asked you to do anything that is forbidden in Islam. But as you know, highly narcissistic individuals will not care about this, and they will justify their request by taking the God card out again and saying, well, I'm your father, I'm your mother, you must obey me, or else. And a lot of people fear this threat. So they end up complying and doing what their parents want because they don't want to go through the wrath of their anger. And for this reason, many people choose to sever ties. Another reason is constant physical abuse and domestic violence. So malignant parents usually discipline in this way. And it gets too much. People get depression. People develop a very strong hatred for their parents because of it. Because it's very regular. Every time the father gets upset, or even the mother, she will lash out, she will throw things, sharp keys, sharp knives, tables, chairs, the lot get thrown. Screaming, shouting, it's horrible. People hide in rooms, hide under beds, hide in toilets to get away from their malignant parents. I have clients in their late 20s, early 30s, they still have marks and scars from the abuse they went through physically when they were children. This is not acceptable. And many people still experience physical abuse in adulthood with their parents. And if their parents are too elderly to physically abuse their adult children, they might do things like spit on them and abuse them verbally. So verbal abuse is another thing that a lot of people go through from childhood, from their malignant, toxic parents. They will get constant, daily verbal abuse, insults, belittling, degradation, the lot. Like really horrible, nasty words thrown at them every day. You're ugly, you're a failure, you're horrible, you're pathetic, you're stupid, you'll never be loved, you're not wanted, I wish I never had you, I wish you were dead, I curse you, I'll never forgive you, you're so bad, you're a terrible person, you're a narcissist, oh, you might get that one too, you're a psychopath, you're not normal, you're possessed, you've got jinns in you. Oh, you'll hear that one too from your parents, if they're malignant and they're verbally vile. So yes, absolutely distance yourself from these people. You will have to sever ties, even if it's temporarily, to save yourself from this, because there are people who go through this daily, guys, daily, for years and years. And you know, sometimes these parents are known in the community. They're part of a mosque committee, they are imams, they are teachers, they're respected people in public. So when these children go to complain about the abuse of their parents, they get turned away. They're like, no, we're not willing to hear any of this about this person. No, we like this person. We're supporting this person. What have you done to make this person, angry? You must have really angered your father. Go back and fear Allah and your father. Go back and fear Allah and your mother. That's what happens in our communities and our mosques. People get turned away. Like, how dare you speak about your parents like this? Do you have no shame speaking about your parents? Oh, wait, I haven't even touched the worst of it yet. Oh, this list goes on. So let's continue. Another reason will be that they've instilled such a fear in their children's hearts of their parents that they actually fear death. Okay? Some parents will always threaten to kill their children if they don't comply. So their children start to live in this paranoia and constant fear of actually being killed one day if they really mess up with their parents. Because all they hear all the time is, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you one day. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And you know what these malignant parents will do? They will take out knives and they will take out, like if they have a gun, right? I know this happens in the US where people are allowed to keep guns. You might take a gun out and say, you see this gun? If you disobey me, or if you misbehave, or if I get another call from your teacher, I'm going to use this on you. So they instill this fear. Every time their dad gets angry or their mum gets really angry, they're terrified. They just want to run away from home. They want to hide. They're too scared to come out of their rooms. What life is this? What Muslim parents are these? Right, where their children get PTSD every time they stomp up the stairs. They're terrified that they're going to barge into their rooms and do something to them. I have clients who still have PTSD from this. They don't like hearing angry stomping up the stairs because it takes them back to the days when their dad would do that. And he would come up with a belt or a stick or something to punish them. So when they hear it, they get panic attacks. And they're in their 30s and 40s now. So the constant threat of murder and violence is something that the malignant narcissist will do a lot. And this goes on to my next point, which is sexual abuse. I've mentioned this before. And it's when parents sexually abuse their children. It happens a lot. It happens more than you know. It's just something a lot of people don't talk about. And it's horrified me. It's horrified me to my core that so many people, men and women, have been through this with their parents and family members, and they've never been able to talk about it. And until today, they have very bad PTSD and intimacy issues in marriage because of it. And sometimes they're sexually molested and abused by their own siblings. So if it's not the parents, it'll be the siblings or the uncles or cousins or the babysitter or their teacher in the mosque or, I've heard that one a lot too. And then you wonder why so many people don't want anything to do with their parents. They want to sever all contact with their parents as soon as they are able to. As soon as they're able to leave the home, they just run away. And they want nothing to do with their parents. Would you blame them? Would you blame them? How could you maintain any family ties with parents who sexually abused you? How could you do that? It's not possible. And how can sheikhs force people to maintain family ties with their siblings after being molested? And how could they look at their brothers the same way ever again? How can they ever feel comfortable? It's not possible. They quote the hadith by Jubair ibn Mut'im, radiallahu anhu, who reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يدخل الجنة قاطع رحم. The one who severs their family ties will not enter paradise. This is Sahih Hadith, okay? We can't argue with it. But does it make sense to you that the Prophet ﷺ had these people in mind when he said that? Rapists and abusers and psychopaths? No, he didn't. He's talking about a normal situation with a normal family where the family members will argue over petty things and fall out and get upset with each other. He's talking about this situation because you can't cut your family members off over things that are petty. This is what the hadith means. It doesn't mean that you have to tolerate the worst of abuse just because that abuse has come from your family members. Because what happens in a abnormal family is the narcissistic parents will actually encourage the hatred between siblings, and they will fuel problems between them, and they will fuel the abuse between brothers and sisters. So sometimes, like I said before, it will be the mother who encourages the brothers to abuse the sisters, and the golden child is put on a pedestal, and the others are abused and used as servants and slaves and so on and so forth. So we're not talking about your regular family arguments and problems that a lot of people actually see as entertainment. And that's why they love reality TV shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. No, we are talking about something that you'd see in a Netflix crime documentary. From how ugly and horrific the situation is. And the victims will feel so much hate from their parents towards them. And this can actually lead to some parents doing black magic on their own children. On their own children. I have a client who said to me that she found in her mother's bag a photo of herself, and it's got pins and strange writings all over it. She took a picture and she sent it to someone who does ruqya, and the raqi told her that this is black magic being done on her. So the mother had hidden it in her bag, and she was looking for her medication because they were out, and the mother wasn't feeling well, and she came across the picture. And up until that point, she wasn't feeling herself. She had very bad health problems. She was suffering so much from so much anxiety, so many issues in her life. She wasn't able to go to work. She wasn't able to get married. So many problems were happening with her. I mean, she was even struggling to pray. She wasn't able to read Quran. She said, I don't know what happened to me for a very long time. But the Raqi told her to destroy this photo that she found, because everything that had happened to her in her life in those recent years were a result of the black magic that her mother had done on her. So, unfortunately, you do get malignant mothers like this who do black magic on their own children, especially the children they're very envious of. So sometimes she will do black magic on her son so he never gets married, so she can have him all to herself. And sometimes she will do black magic on her daughter out of very deep envy. She's very envious of her daughter and she wants to sabotage her life. So this is another trait of the malignant parent. They will do their best to sabotage everything in their children's lives out of envy and out of just pure malice. They don't want you to see anything good in your life or have anything good in your life. So they will sabotage your opportunities, your marriage proposals. And sometimes this envy can be from their children being so much more beautiful than them. So maybe this malignant mother takes great pride in her beauty and, how she looks. So if her daughters turn out to be more beautiful than her, this could be something she's unable to deal with because her self-worth is attached to her beauty. And for this reason, they're highly competitive, even with their own children. So even if she's a doctor, for example, if her children turn out to be better doctors, she's going to have a problem with that. If the father is a businessman and the children turn out to be more successful than him, he's going to have a problem with that and he will start to sabotage. He might even take it to court and sue you for things. Right? We've heard that one before. Your own parents can sue you out of jealousy. They might demand loads of money from you unjustly, unreasonably, because you owe them all that money. You owe them this and you owe them that. So they start to sabotage your life with their requirements. And these requirements keep coming. They're not one-offs. They're regular. And sometimes this sabotaging can be seen in your marriage. So if you have malignant Muslim parents, they will interfere in your marriage and they will cause marital problems between you and your wife or you and your husband because they want a divorce to happen. They want to see the marriage break down. So they will pit you against each other. They'll pit you against your in-laws. They will have issues with the in-laws all the time. They cause a lot of drama and chaos. And so much fitna comes out from their meddling. And this causes so many people to just say, I don't want a relationship with my parents. I want to cut ties with my parents because they're ruining my life. They're making my life a complete nightmare. It is hell having my parents in my life. And you know what? I don't blame them. I genuinely don't blame them because it's really difficult to deal with parents who are constantly on a mission to ruin your life and destroy everything that you've built and everything you are. Scholars need to take into account these types of parents when they preach because they're not normal. These are people who are manipulated and controlled by demonic entities. They're not normal. And believe me when I say this, they know exactly what they're doing. They love the intimidation and the fear that they instill in their children because of this power they have. Why would they want that to be taken away if they work on themselves. No, they're not going to work on themselves. They love this power and control. And you will highly offend them if you ever suggest therapy or family counselling to them. Or God forbid ruqya. Oh God, don't tell your Muslim parent that they need ruqya because they're acting abnormal, like they have jinn problems. Oh, may God have mercy on your soul if you even dare to say something like that. I'm telling you, it will be at that point the malignant father will get his gun out. After threatening to use it for 20 years, that would be the day he finally takes it out. Don't say I didn't warn you. And he'll go into a rage. You know why? Because you've triggered his qareen. It's like they've been exposed. How on earth did you figure that out? How did you know I've got jinn problems? So you'll see it in the rage that comes out when you accuse them of having a demon inside them. They go nuts. They totally lose it. So it's not safe to do that at all. And you best believe you will go through the ugliest smear campaign after that. And in general, with these narcissistic parents, they love smear campaigns. So they're always on the phone to the first person who will listen to them, complaining about you. They'll tell the whole village, the whole city, NBC, BBC, you'll be all over the BBC when you do something to really upset the malignant narc. And this is something that will also destroy your confidence because everyone now sees you as a bad person. Like, oh, what a bad child, what a bad son, what a bad daughter. So you'll be portrayed as the abuser and they will play victim. So in general, these malignant narcissists will always strip you from your rights and neglect you emotionally. Okay, and they will sabotage your life spiritually, in a religious way, psychologically. They will mess you up and you'll have the worst mental health problems that you will carry into adulthood because of them. Because you didn't leave, because you didn't maintain a long enough distance or cut the relationship temporarily until things got better. Right? You stay away until they get better, until they get the help they need. And if they don't, you have to still stay away because they're not good for your life. Even though they're your biological parents, you've got to stay away because of their satanic mission that becomes obvious later on when you become aware of it. And like I said before, some people are compelled to stay away long term because of the horrific abuse that was inflicted on them that causes them to never want to see their parents ever again. So you can't blame them. No one can blame them. And when someone finds peace away from this family, away from these parents, it's very difficult for anyone to convince them to go back because they have to maintain family ties. You're speaking Chinese to these people. They have no idea what you're talking about because you make no sense. Because for the first time in their lives, they feel free because they're happy in their new environment where there are good people who love them and care about them. Why would they want to ever go back? So I think it's time a lot of people are set free from the guilt and the incorrect understanding that Muslims have to go back to these disgusting families and parents in order to enter Jannah, because that doesn't sound like a loving, peaceful Islam to me. And you know why? Because parents also have a responsibility to meet their children halfway and fix up and address all the issues that they've caused in the lives of their children. But the major issue that the majority of people are facing is that the parents are far too arrogant to admit that they're wrong and to apologize or seek forgiveness for all of the abuse and oppression they inflicted on their children and for all the rights that were taken from them. You see, malignant Muslim narcissists don't do this, and this is supported by the preachers who tell everyone that it is the responsibility of the children to maintain ties with their parents and their siblings, no matter what. So the toxic parents are like, well, we're not going to do anything. So they're not making it easier for their children to forgive them. And at the same time, they're using the God card to torment their children and tell them that they will never see paradise because they won't compromise and obey them despite everything that they've done to them. Even though their children have become better Muslims and have increased in their faith and have become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they moved away from these parents. Okay, so they've moved to a better environment where they are around people who love Allah and, who help them and support them with their spiritual journey and their mental health problems and their trauma. But yet, these Muslim parents will always say, you will never see paradise, you're not a good person, you are from the cursed. And as you know, they love saying these things because it's so much easier to blame other people than to actually reflect on their own behaviour. There's actually a story about a man who once went to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and he was complaining about his son's disobedience to him. So this is when Umar became a Khalifa. So he summoned the boy and questioned him about his disobedience to his father. The boy responded with this: "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, hasn't a child rights over his father?" "Certainly," replied Umar. "What are they, Amir al-Mu'mineen?" So Umar said that he should choose a good mother for him, give him a good name, and teach him the Quran. "O Amir al-Mu'mineen, my father has done nothing of this. My mother was a fire worshipper. He gave me the name of Julalan, it means dung beetle, and he did not teach me a single letter of the Quran." So Umar turned to the father and he said to him, "You have come to me to complain about the disobedience of your son, but you have failed in your duty to him before he has failed in his duty to you. You have done wrong to him before he has wronged you." So this story emphasizes on the fact that you will reap what you sow, even if you're a Muslim parent. So if you do not raise your children properly, you're going to lose out when they're older. Because Umar radiallahu anhu, he didn't say to the boy, you need to obey your father, no matter what. Even if he didn't give you any of your rights, that's not what he said. He turned to the father and scolded him. Because in Islam, we are not meant to be slaves to our parents or slaves to our husbands and wives and siblings and friends. There is no slave-master relationship in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet ﷺ to eliminate these relationships from society because masters did own slaves. Slaves didn't have rights. They had to give everything to the master. So a lot of parents treat their children in the same way. So they will not invest in their children. They won't give their children their rights of, just a decent upbringing that's safe and free from abuse, to say the least. But they will expect all their rights and more from their children. It doesn't work like that. In Islam, it doesn't work like that. You will reap what you sow. And if children run away from their parents in adulthood, that's no one's fault but theirs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Isra, verse 24, وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحُ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُلْ رَبِّ إِرْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِ صَغِيرًا. And be humble with your parents out of mercy, and pray, "My Lord, be merciful to them as they raised me with mercy when I was young." So do you think in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about the rapists, the abusers, and the oppressors? Of course he's not. He's talking about the parents who raise their children in the best way possible, the empaths. Because the parents who raise their children with mercy are the ones who do not inflict abuse on them. So Allah is asking children to pray for their parents in their old age and in general, and to be humble and kind with them, because they need to show them the same mercy that was shown to them when they were growing up. So this verse about parents and honouring parents and giving parents this privilege does not include all parents. It includes the empath parents, the ones who upheld their duties, roles and responsibilities towards their children. The father provided for his family. He was a qawwam, so he provided, he protected, and he led the family in a merciful manner. There was no abuse. There was no distress. Everything was done in a harmonious way. There was nurturing and love from the mother. There was education. There were opportunities for the children to grow in a healthy, loving, safe environment. So the parents whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honours in the Quran, and the ones whom the Prophet ﷺ talks about in very high regard, are the empath parents and the parents who actually tried hard. So you might be someone empathic who ended up marrying a narcissist and you realised later, but you did everything in your power to raise your children in the best way possible in accordance to Islamic teachings. So you taught your children about Islam, you taught them about morality, you took them to the mosque, you gave them a good education, you provided for them, and so on and so forth, okay? You fed them, you took care of them, you cared about their safety. So even if you didn't manage to do that with an empath partner, if you tried your best to give them that upbringing, then you will be included. Okay, don't despair because you were married to a narcissist and it was a real struggle to raise your children properly. And even if you're a single parent, if you did your best to raise your children without abuse and without turning them away from Islam and without destroying their mental health in the process, you've won. And what do you win? You win a high station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a parent. Because as soon as you become a parent, you now have the opportunity to earn Jannah in such a beautiful way. And narcissists do not take advantage of this. They actually destroy it. And empaths are the ones who take advantage of it, and that's why they have quality children. Even if they have just the one, he or she will turn into someone of high caliber and favoured by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because so much love and care was poured into this child. But this doesn't mean that only empaths can have these types of children. You'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes allows empath children to be born in toxic homes. And there's a very good reason for this, which I will explain in another podcast, inshallah. But you can always fix your situation if you have been abusive to your children unintentionally because of severe mental health problems that you may have had, or jinn issues, or black magic, or addictions, such as drug addictions. And also if you are a victim of abuse from your narcissistic husband or wife. Sometimes this abuse can cause you to have pent-up anger that you take out unintentionally on your own children. So you'll be screaming and shouting at them for no reason, disciplining them for no reason, fighting with your husband or wife in front of them, complaining about your husband or wife to them and burdening them with all your problems, and breaking down in front of them, crying and having tantrums and mentioning suicide. I want to kill myself. I don't want to live anymore. I hate this life. You terrify them. You give them trauma because they now feel very unstable. It terrifies children to see their parents having meltdowns and being so vulnerable. And sometimes parents who are under great stress will threaten to leave or send the children away. So you might threaten to send them back home, and that terrifies them. Or you threaten to send them off to their grandmother who's tyrannical, or to their grandfather who is terribly strict, Sometimes this is done unintentionally, but it's still abuse, it's still trauma that you're putting your children through because you haven't resolved your own issues. And you'll notice when codependent mothers live with narcissistic husbands, over time they become emotionally unavailable, especially if they're married to a man-child. So if a mother has to step into the role of being the qawwam, so she's now the breadwinner, the provider, the protector, the decision maker, She will get burnt out and frustrated. She'll lose respect for her husband. And this is also taken out on the children. And over time, she becomes very emotionally unavailable. And this is why codependent mothers can turn very cold. And they won't show any love or any affection to their children because they're so exhausted. They're in survival mode. They don't have time for love and nurturing and all of that because they've had to take over the duties and responsibilities of these losers they're married to. So they do love their children, but they do not have the space to be feminine and maternal with them because they've had their rights taken away from them by their husbands. So it's a vicious circle. Okay, that's why so many people have emotionally unavailable mothers. And it becomes very difficult to communicate and bond with these mothers. And sometimes these mothers can turn toxic. So she might have started off as an empathic codependent, and over time she becomes a toxic codependent the longer she stays with this man. And you might start seeing fights about someone cheating. Okay, a back burner, a new supply. And the more trauma the mother goes through, the more she's going to take out her anger and frustration on the children. So she might start doing erratic things as well. She might start having her own meltdowns when she never used to before. She will not show gratitude or praise because now she's telling the children, I'm only here because of you. You owe me. You need to do this to please me. I'm your mother, and all of that. And then over time, you'll start to notice that she starts to put the codependent child on a pedestal because this child is the most compliant and the most well-behaved and the one who doesn't argue or stand up for herself or himself. They just get on with whatever their mother wants them to do. And this is how codependency is grown and encouraged in young children. So things get bad. And children learn how to be people pleasers, to keep their mum happy. And she will just take it out on everyone. Honestly, you'll have a 3-year-old spill some milk and she will go crazy at that 3-year-old. It's not a normal reaction, but it's because of the stress that she's under that she will start to treat her children in this way. And her children will start to develop resentment towards her and will no longer want to be around her when they're older. And that's when she'll use the God card, right? Like narcissistic parents, when they say, well, if you're not going to do this for me or that for me, if you're not going to obey me and listen to everything I say, you're not going to go to paradise. I'm going to die, not being pleased with you. And then people start feeling guilty and they fall into depression because they know their mother's not a bad person, that she is like this because of all the trauma she's been through or all the trauma that their father has been through. Because you saw it unfold in front of your eyes. You saw all the abuse that they went through with their husbands or wives, and you also know that they had a tough childhood. And even though it's so annoying what you've had to go through because of that, and you've had to bear the brunt of all their childhood trauma and all their issues and all their mental health problems, it's best to be patient with these types of parents because you know that it wasn't intentional for them to directly abuse you like the malignant narcissists do. So I would say maintain some distance and boundaries for sure. Don't cut them off. Don't be cruel to them. Don't blame them. Don't be nasty. Don't be horrible to them. But approach this one from a compassionate perspective and work your way around having a relationship with them where no boundaries are overstepped and where you're not carrying their trauma, because they do have their own responsibility of working on themselves and dealing with their problems and their issues and their past. That's their burden to carry and not yours. So keep those boundaries in place and inshallah you'll be able to work around it. You can get coaching for this. And I also advise that you help them get some external support like counselling, community support, family support to help them with their burdens and other things that they may be struggling with. So you can help them financially, or you can get them the support they need simply to reduce stress, help them relax and make their lives easier. It's these parents whom you need to try and forgive so you can reap the rewards of bir al-walidain, which is honouring the parents. And in most cases, it's these parents who do self-reflect, and they are the most likely to change when their children reach adulthood, because they do self-reflect and they may ask for forgiveness and, make the efforts to fix the relationships that they had broken with their children in childhood. And you'll also find that it's easier to forgive parents with whom you had a lot of good memories with when you were children. So sometimes healing can look like focusing on the good rather than the bad, because there was a lot of good. So I always advise my clients to remember the good times when it comes to dealing with parents who didn't intentionally set out to harm them, because there will be quite a lot. And that's a perspective shift that's needed to be able to move on with your life and not resent your parents so much. And this is, of course, very difficult for those who don't have many good memories of their parents, whether that's from childhood or adulthood. So it's harder for these people to heal because there's so much to unpack from their traumas. For example, I always hear that they were never complimented growing up, they were never praised or validated, they were never congratulated when they did something well, when they achieved something. They never got any gratitude or appreciation for the good that they did for their parents. And this really hit their self-worth and self-esteem. And that's why they always feel like they're not good enough. Nothing they do is ever good enough, and they're always people-pleasing and going out of their way to help people at the expense of their own well-being. And all of this comes from parental trauma that scholars and preachers, well, the majority of them, don't understand. Because if they understood it, there would be more information about it and a lot more community support as well in mosques, Islamic centres and Sharia councils to help the victims who are suffering from malignant parenting. Because at the moment, what people are being told is that they need to fear Allah in their parents. And if they want to be forgiven, they need to forgive their abusive parents. And they need to forget, and they need to move on and have good relations and stop complaining about their parents so that they can enter Jannah. This is not a good approach. It's not a good approach at all. Many people will leave Islam if they're being told this, especially young people, because malignant parenting has a devastatingly strong ripple effect in society. And we can see this in the men who didn't have role models to teach them how to be qawwams. They rely on red pill men and either become man-children or malignant narcissists as well. And you see the codependent women who turn toxic and they seek validation from toxic men because they never had fathers who cared about them. And you have women who turn malignant and narcissistic because they grew up seeing a father who never loved their mother, and they don't trust men because they also saw their father walk out on them. And this resulted in them being raised by a very stressed and bitter single mother who wasn't provided for. They were completely abandoned and neglected because their fathers had washed their hands of all responsibility towards their children. These men run away from responsibility, or they're criminals who commit crimes, and they're always in and out of jail, so they can never be there for their families. So many women and men grew up with absent fathers. And this is oppression, because you're taking away the rights of your children by not being present. One of the reasons why a lot of people struggle with being abandoned by their fathers especially is because those fathers go on to starting new families and act like the family they already have doesn't exist. So it's like they don't have children. They forget about them and just move on. And they start love bombing someone else, and they either take care of her children or they have more children with someone else. And usually the new supply is a narcissistic woman or a toxic codependent, or she's a backburner. And again, what happens here is the mother becomes very bitter, very resentful, and she takes it out on the children because she feels like she's been scammed by this man. And it's for this reason so many women in our communities cannot accept polygamy, because a lot of man children are doing it and they have no idea how to do it properly. They use and abuse it. So these men who abandon their children are usually the ones who enter into polygamous marriages, or they abandon their families completely for a new woman. They might move to a new country and just cut all contact with them. And for this reason, you find so many men and women now who grow up with no fathers. Because when this man-child has had enough of responsibilities, he will just abandon his wife with the children and let her get on with it. And if he's malignant, he will do it just to punish her. It will be like revenge. Okay, you don't want to obey me. You don't want to comply with me even though I'm abusing you. No problem. Let's see how you get on. Let's see how you survive. He'll cut all contact, all financial support, and he will abandon his wife and his children just to punish her. And he will go and start a new life elsewhere. And he knows she's going to struggle. He knows the children will struggle dealing with a single mum who's been relying on him for so many years. And he does this because he wants her to beg for him back. He wants her to say, I will do anything. I will be a slave. You can abuse me until the end of time. Just don't divorce me and leave me alone with the children, because you know very well I don't have a supportive family. I have no one in this country, and so on and so forth, right? And that's what they want to hear. They want to see you grovel so that you don't get divorced and don't get abandoned. And then the cycle of abuse gets worse after that. And it's these fathers who present themselves as, mashallah, pious people in society. They see the outward religious facade, but this is what they're like with their families behind closed doors. And sometimes women who are so dependent on malignant narcissists, they know that when they go back into that cycle, they're going to get physically abused again. They're going to go through verbal abuse and religious abuse and everything. And even their own children will be abused, but she can't live without him. She needs him. She depends on him for survival. I mean, it's crazy to think that there are still women who are like this in 2024, right? Women would be tolerant with men like this back in 7th century Arabia when they really were dependent on men for survival. It's unacceptable now for women to be in this position because of all the freedoms and opportunities women have to be independent and financially secure. But there are women who are raised to be like this. You can't blame them. And there are women who will not be accepted back into their families. And they don't have a job, they have no qualifications because their own fathers banned them from an education. Their own fathers didn't allow them to continue further education. And they didn't allow them to work. So they end up marrying the same type of men. And when these malignant men know that you have no support system, they take full advantage of it. And they put you through more abuse because they know you're weak and vulnerable. And then when the children go to complain to the sheikhs, I hate my father, I don't want anything to do with my father, I want to cut my father off, I never want to speak to him again, they say, fear Allah. How dare you? Do you not want to enter Jannah? Fear Allah and your father, go back and repent and seek forgiveness from your father. At the end of the day, he's your father. Just because he is your father biologically doesn't qualify him as a father Islamically if he is neglecting and abandoning and abusing and taking advantage of the people under his care. The high status of a father in Islam is connected to his level of tarbiyah. So if you want to be honoured as a father, You have to be excellent in your tarbiyah and your character and your morality and your faith and your fear of Allah, because these children are an amana. They're a trust. They're a rizq. They're a gift for you. Allah has given you this gift of children as a gateway to paradise for you. He's opened more than one door where you could gain rewards and good deeds to enter paradise with through your children. And again, this is a lifeline for narcissists, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects narcissists to use their intelligence and say to themselves, I went through a horrible childhood myself. I don't want to put my children through that, because I know and I can see how much it damaged me. So Allah's given me the gift of children so that I can fix what was broken in me through them. I won't give them the same childhood that I went through. I will not put them through the same trauma and abuse. I want to give them a better life. So children are lifelines in their lives, but they do not take advantage of these lifelines, and instead they make the decision to put their children through what they went through and worse. And when you abuse the vulnerable under your care, the door to hell is wide open for you. Wide open. Because they are an amana. Okay, they're a trust. And when Allah entrusts you with something precious or someone precious you need to take care of, and you abuse them, the punishment will be severe. But because narcissists do not fully worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are obedient to Iblis and the soldiers of Iblis, they don't care. They don't think about a day of judgment or their accounting or the punishments. They have no fear of Allah because they have become so delusional by their obedience to Iblis. And you can apply this to husbands and wives as well. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a good spouse, the spouse is an amana for you. Especially for the husband, because he becomes the wali of his wife. He's the maintainer, the protector, the provider. He's meant to look after her. Men are the caretakers of women and children in Islam, and also the elderly. So if you abuse women and your children or the elderly, you're not going to be heading to a good place at all. These are the vulnerable under your care. And when you have a good husband and you take advantage of him and you abuse him, again, he's a trust. He's a gift for you. He's a rizq. If you mistreat him, you're not going to a good place either. Good people and blessings are sent to everyone as lifelines, but especially for narcissists. So if empathic people are blessed with good spouses, then this spouse will help you in your journey. They'll support you. They'll help you in every area of life. And you've got great company on this journey back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're a narcissist, then this person will help you to get better and improve in your character and your deen. So when Allah gives us a blessing, we're meant to take care of it. And that's why He gives us rights, roles, responsibilities and duties towards each other so that we can maintain healthy and happy relationships. You can apply this to everyone. Your sisters, your brothers, sometimes, they will be a rizq for you as well. If you have a wonderful brother or a wonderful sister and they're supportive and they're always there for you and they help you. And, siblings can be a great rizq, and they can also be a great trial if they're narcissistic and malignant. So everyone is tested in their own ways, especially with their family members. So some people might have a malignant father but have a wonderful husband. Some people have a toxic codependent mother, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compensated them with a kind and loving wife. So you'll always find someone in your life to be the blessing as compensation for what you have been through with the narcissist in your life. And if you haven't found that person yet, that person's coming. Okay, the blessing is coming. Allah always compensates people for what they lose in this life, because what they lose can be something very significant, because the person who isn't present in their life isn't giving them the rights they are due. And as a result of that, they suffer a lot. Women who are raised with fathers who don't care about them suffer. Men who are raised with mothers who aren't loving suffer. People who are raised with toxic, malignant siblings suffer a lot. So you'll always find the diamond in the rough in your life. Could be your best friend, could be your neighbour, could be a work colleague, it could be a new friend you make, and you bond very quickly and deeply with that person. So always look at the positive side of things, even when it looks like life has become very dark. You'll always find the blessings in your life. I have recorded a podcast about this. It's number 59. So do try and listen to it when you have some time, inshallah. It is very important that people self-reflect and are very aware of how they parent their children. Even fathers who go away to work and provide for their families are harming their children by being away for so long. So these fathers fall into the category of the ones you can be patient with and forgive because their intention was good. They wanted to give you the best life, so they had to work abroad or work for months on end away from the family to give you the lifestyle they believed you deserved. However, this came at the cost of sacrificing quality time and bonding time with the children. So this bonding time is very important for daughters, and it's equally important for boys who need their father's affection and his presence so that he can teach them many things and guide them and show them what a real qawwam is. Because many of these boys grow up to believe that love is only to be shown in what you can provide for your family, because that's what they saw their fathers do. So many men grow up not knowing how to emotionally bond with their wives and their children because they never had that growing up. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that this is absent in their life because they were never given the tools to learn how to form those kinds of connections. But they will be excellent providers because their fathers were, you see. So this is the downside to having a father who works so much and gives you a great lifestyle, but he's not there to show you how to regulate your emotions and how to form emotional connections with others. But this is something you can learn when you're older. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road and you've lost your chance. No, there are loads of coaches and people who can help you to explore your emotional side and become emotionally available to form emotional connections with others. Okay, it can be done. So it's not a disaster, and this father will always be better than the father who neglects the needs of his family and his children financially. So he's neglecting their medical needs and their educational needs. Some fathers will even forbid their children from a decent education and freedom. There are some children, especially girls, they're locked up at home and they're not given any freedom whatsoever. And then they wonder why their children rebel as soon as they hit the teenage phase. It's because of suppression. And it's usually these children who do everything under the moon and the sun as soon as they're able to. They'll go into drugs and drinking and zina and gangs and theft and all sorts of things because they just want to let out all the suppression. And that's why you find that so many supposedly very religious narc parents are unbearably strict with their children. And this will backfire on them as soon as their children get a little window of freedom. I've seen this happen a lot. So suppression and being extremist in your strictness with your children, I'm telling you, it's going to go the other way. And that's why many sheikhs and scholars and preachers and imams have children who are completely different from them. You'll see that they're not practicing, they could be atheist, they drink, they have boyfriends and girlfriends and they go clubbing and they do all sorts. And it's because they were not raised by loving parents who taught them about Islam in the correct, loving way. So this is what happens. And this is what happens when you're too strict. And failed expectations can cause many narcissists and toxic codependents to become even more toxic when their children reach adulthood and they get disappointed by the outcome. This is not what I expected. This is not what I planned for. So they become even more abusive, which pushes their children away even more, and they end up severing all ties with their parents. Now, on the other hand, you'll find a lot of people as well who belong to families that are irritating, annoying. You'll have your issues with them, but they won't be highly abusive like the malignant narcissists. So you'll be dealing with a lot of immaturity, pettiness. They nitpick on problems, they cause drama, they love gossiping and all of that. And there might be some jealousy here and there. As long as it's manageable, then just placing the right boundaries will be enough. You don't need to cut them off. You don't need to do anything like that. You just need to place the right boundaries and create enough distance to maintain respect. Because there are some people who just love drama. They love to have something to entertain them. They get bored. So don't entertain them. Don't fuel this in your mothers or your fathers. So just be the mature one and resolve it by not getting involved. And this way you'll be able to maintain civil ties of kinship. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu reported that a Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, أخبرني ما يقربني من الجنة ويباعدني من النار. قال تعبد الله ولا تشرك به شيئا وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصل الرحم. The Bedouin asked him, tell me what will bring me near to paradise and keep me far from the hellfire. And the Prophet ﷺ said, worship Allah and do not associate anything with Him, perform the prayers, pay zakah, and maintain ties of kinship. So this is a Sahih hadith, and there's one thing that I would like you to notice in this hadith, which is the Prophet ﷺ said that you need to do these things in order to earn yourself paradise. Okay? Now these worship rituals that we are meant to do are meant to be enjoyable. We're meant to enjoy worshipping Allah and not associating partners with Him. We're meant to enjoy performing the prayers and paying zakah and helping people and also maintaining ties of kinship. So this is only possible with parents and family members who are not malignant abusers. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that the best way to help a Muslim oppressor is by stopping him or her from oppressing. So if we are the ones who are being oppressed, then it means that to stop this abuse from happening, I need to remove myself from this relationship. I need to distance myself. I need to temporarily cut my ties to this person until they see the error of their ways. And sometimes that's still not possible. Okay, because sometimes too much damage has been done, or the abuser is just far too arrogant to make peace with the situation and with the people whom they've hurt. And that unfortunately becomes their own curse in life. That blinds them to the good that they can do before the end of their time. And honestly, sometimes even when these people are on their deathbed, they still don't see the error of their ways and they're still arrogant even till the last moment. And sometimes you've just got to accept that this was their fate in this life and the next, because this is what they chose for themselves. So we need to stop allowing them to get away with the God card that they use all the time, which is, it's my right to be obeyed and honoured and treated well, even though I'm an oppressor, even though I didn't give my children anything, even though I treated my children terribly and I gave them so much pain and trauma. You can't get away with something like that. You can't use our beautiful religion to get away with oppression. And always remember that even if you never receive an apology in this life, Allah sees and hears everything. He has saved so many golden tickets for you for the Day of Judgment because of the rights that were taken away from you by your parents. And perhaps those golden tickets will give you fast-track entry into Jannah, because what you went through wasn't little. You went through a lot of abuse, a lot of hardship, a lot of pain and suffering, whether your parents were malignant or not. Sometimes it was the man-child father who took off and abandoned you. So everyone suffers in their own way with difficult parents, but always know, it never goes to waste. Okay, even if you think it has, and you've lost your childhood because of it, and you've got mental health problems because of it, remember, there's so much to learn from these experiences that can help you grow into a better person and make better choices for your future. So now you know who to avoid for marriage. Now you know what kind of mother you want for your children, or what kind of father. Now you know what kind of upbringing you want to give them so that you don't repeat the same cycle. Let the cycle end with you. Let the barakah of this experience be in you by ending it. And invest your time in working on yourself and healing yourself so that you can become the best father or the best mother for your future and current children. And if you don't have children, then you can become a great husband or a great wife to someone empathic. This life is too short to waste it on demonic spirits who want to hinder our progress. Okay, we can't let that happen. We have to move on. This life is temporary. This life is a test. All of this will be forgotten. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His mercy will never forget. So you'll find all your good deeds and all the patience that you had and all the suffering that you went through, you'll find them as golden tickets on the last day. And alhamdulillah for the comfort in the belief that a last day is coming. So I'll end it here. I hope that you found the podcast helpful. Thank you for listening until now if you're still with me. I'd like to conclude this podcast with a dua found in verse 15 in Surah Al-Ahqaf, and it's a very beautiful dua. ربي أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وأصلح لي في ذريتي إني تبت إليك وإني من المسلمين. My Lord, inspire me to always be thankful for your favours which you blessed me and my parents with, and to do good deeds and please you, and instill righteousness in my offspring. I truly repent to you, and I truly submit to your will. So this dua comes after a command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes in this verse to us about honouring our empath parents and our parents who tried and our parents who didn't intentionally harm us or abuse us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا, and we commanded people to honour and respect their parents. And in the verse after it, verse 16, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أولئك الذين نتقبل عنهم أحسن ما عملوا ونتجاوز عن سيئاتهم في أصحاب الجنة وعد الصدق الذي كانوا يوعدون. It is these people from whom we will accept the good they did and overlook their faults, along with the residents of paradise, in fulfillment of the true promise they have been given. So this is how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves empaths and how much He elevates their status to such great heights because they've become wonderful parents and they've raised wonderful children. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them so much. And it is an obligation upon us to appreciate them, honour them and respect them. So try your best to make amendments where you can. And like I said, I will repeat it again. If you have parents who tried their best, but they suffered because they were a single parent or because they had a difficult husband or wife and they unintentionally abused you, try and find it in your heart to forgive them so you can be among these people, especially if your parents have been making an effort to be better with you, to compensate you for what they have put you through, even if they haven't had the bravery yet to apologise for everything that they did. So thank you again for listening. May Allah bless you. I really hope this has helped and inspired someone today and that it's given you a deeper understanding, some healing and closure in this difficult subject. So until the next podcast, inshallah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.